Hey, my name is Rebecca, and I am a staff member with Advance the Faith, and I am so excited for our upcoming mission trips. And one of the things that goes into that excitement building and preparing for the trip is talking about why we have certain guidelines or expectations. Throughout this module, you will see several expectations or guidelines listed and clearly stated. And I think sometimes when we think about adults going on a mission trip, we would maybe be tempted to question, why do we have to review these things? These things seem obvious. But really, it's just us trying to be as clear as possible to set the whole team up for success so that it can be the most positive experience, not only for those that we are serving, but for our team as well. And so this video is not necessarily a list of our guidelines, rather it's simply the heart behind why. So we encourage you, listen through this whole video so that as you're continuing to go through the training, you can remember the why behind what we do and the mission behind these guidelines. The first thing to keep in mind as to why we even have guidelines is because clarity is kind and setting expectations is kind. It is our effort to be kind to you as an organization and you being so willing to give time from your schedule to come on a trip with us to serve a community that we love. Romans 12:9 teaches us that it is loving to be sincere. And so we want to be clear in what it is exactly that we expect from our trip members. And we realize that it is impossible to read our minds or know what is expected of you if we don't state it. And so that is why we have you go through the training module, to go to training meetings. It's our effort to provide as much clarity as possible before the trip. But the next thing just to keep in mind is when it comes to guidelines regarding dress or modesty, you will see that we have some very specific guidelines laid out. And we understand that this can be a sensitive or even annoying subject for some to be told what to wear or what is or isn't appropriate. However, when it comes to cultural sensitivity, there are in fact things that we need to be aware of when it comes to what is appropriate. And we also aim to limit distractions or drawing unnecessary attention to ourselves in how we present ourselves, because that leaves an impression that could make the difference in whether those we interact with are open to having further conversation with us about the gospel. And this looks different in different cultures and contexts, and so we have considered what is appropriate specifically for the Bahamas. However, know that especially if you're planning on going on future mission trips, that this is a normal conversation to have when participating in international mission trips. And our guidelines are not necessarily a comment on what is typically appropriate, but rather what will be appropriate in the context where we will be serving. And you'll see the guidelines listed in the module, but please reach out to a trip leader prior to going on the trip if you have any questions about this or what kind of clothes to pack. So when it comes to safety guidelines, you will see that we have an entire section on safety. And this is not to scare you. This is not to make you have this expectation that you won't be safe on a trip. Rather, it's simply for us to, plan as best as we can. And you may be a confident, experienced traveler. You may have been on a more extreme international mission trip, or even more likely, you may have been to the Bahamas before, where you have had the freedom to explore and do whatever you want. However, we ask that when you are traveling with Advance the Faith, that you abide by our safety guidelines that will help us to stay on mission and be unified in our efforts. On a similar note, you will see that we have several particularly strict guidelines when it comes to interacting with our children. This is not only to ensure the safety of the children, but to also protect you. Keep in mind that some of the rules that you will see, such as not taking pictures, are not simply our rules, but are legally enforced by local social services. And it is the job of social services to protect the children that we serve, and it is up to us to maintain a positive relationship with social services by abiding by these rules. Otherwise, we may not be permitted to continue serving them. For this reason, it is also imperative that you do not contact children via social media after the trips. And remember, our children have been placed in their homes due to difficult life circumstances that we may or may not realize or be aware of. And our guidelines have been created with this in mind to help promote the most positive experience possible for them as we serve them. Because you are the adult in this circumstance, it is your responsibility to uphold the boundaries we have set. Some children may unintentionally cross these boundaries, so if you are unsure of how to handle a situation, please speak to a trip leader. And also, take a deep breath. While we do need to take our interactions with our children very seriously, please know that it will also be fun. And while many of our friends have been through very challenging circumstances, they're still kids. They need to laugh, smile, and have fun just like you did when you were a kid. And whether they seem to express it, we can confidently say that they will be thankful for your presence and your willingness to listen and have fun with them. And our guidelines do exactly that. They help you to be present as well as helping the children to be present, because when they see phones, they often want to play with them rather than interact with others. And this is a part of the reason why we enforce phones being put to the side. So you'll see more about the guidelines regarding serving our children and using phones in this module. All right, so next, having guidelines promotes having a productive and healthy team and a happy team. So when everyone is aware of the same set of guidelines, it helps us to be on one accord, which we realize is a very churchy term, but it's true. We all understand what is expected of us, what the mission is, and what it is not, and we can hold each other accountable to it, and in turn, we'll be so much happier as a team. So next is that these guidelines help to show us how to do things with excellence on this trip. So think about all the relationships that go into making our mission trips possible. A relationship with God, relationships with our kids, with the staff of the children's homes, with social services, with those that have provided our accommodations, with the local schools and churches. These relationships have required us to build and maintain trust for many years now in the Bahamas. And not only that, but God has entrusted us with this incredible opportunity to represent and share Him in the Bahamas. So we know that children are precious to Jesus, and so we want to serve them well. And we know that Scripture calls us to do everything that we do to the glory of God. Therefore, no matter what it is you are doing on the trip, whether it's in how you dress, use your phone, finish tasks, interact with your teammates, clean up, prepare dinner, remember that the guidelines that we've shared with you or are going to share with you help to demonstrate how to do all those things with excellence and continuing to just be a good representation of Jesus. And on that note, our guidelines help in maintaining all of those relationships that I just stated and our testimony. As we abide by the guidelines that have been set for us by local leaders in the Bahamas, or set as a result of how we've seen our trips are best run, in turn, we continue to maintain and trust the relationships that make these trips possible. And additionally, those we interact with as we serve, they will be aware that we call ourselves followers of Jesus. Therefore, we want to make sure that we set an example and represent Him well, and our guidelines have been created with this in mind. Okay, so we've shared a little bit about the heart behind why we have, strict guidelines for our mission trips. But, as we kind of wrap up, I just want to share that, we know and we believe in grace and recognize that sometimes trip members fail to maintain the guidelines. And in these moments, communication is so important. It may have been a mistake, or most likely it was unintentional. And if at any point on the trip you have concerns regarding the guidelines or feel as though you have failed to maintain one well, speak to your trip leader so that we can help you. However, please know that it is the trip leader's job to uphold the safety of our team and those that we serve. And so if, after having different conversations, you are unwilling to abide by these guidelines, we may have to ask you to travel home. However, we do not anticipate this being an issue, since we have clearly expressed our guidelines and we're going to be preparing in training. So we know that this will be a fantastic trip, and we are just so appreciative, once again, of your willingness to take time out of your schedule to come and serve this community with us and to do it with excellence.